All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here today. We're going to get started. We have a number of folks here today that are going to be sharing their stories. And so we appreciate everybody coming out. My name is Sarah Alexander, and I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. And I'm really honored and humbled to be standing up here today with so many of our farmers who have come out to share their story about how they're impacted by the federal funding freezes that we're currently experiencing through the United States Department of Agriculture. Nearly every farmer in the US works with the USDA in some way. The USDA has had critical programs that have helped farmers with everything from getting loans for their farms to implementing conservation practices to drilling wells. These are everyday things that are critical and vital for our farms and all that they need to do to make ends meet and be a viable farm. For the last month, freezes on payments at the federal level have impacted farmers throughout Maine and throughout the country. The story that you're going to hear today is not unique to Maine, but this is an important story, and we need everyone to know that this is happening all over our state and all over our country. Despite being told that once Secretary Rollins was confirmed that the payments would quickly resume, we're here today to share that our farmers are not receiving their payments. And these are for contracts that have been in effect, some of them for years, for multiple years, where farmers have already laid out the money to make this work happen. They're supposed to get reimbursed for it, and they're not receiving that funding. In Maine, from the information that we've gathered at MAFCA, we know that farmers are waiting on at least $1 million in reimbursements that are out there right now. And this is just a small fraction of the money that is potentially owed on all of these contracts, many of which are multi-year and would go well into the future. The total is also much higher when you add in all of the nonprofit service providers that are currently waiting on reimbursements and funding as well. So that includes some of the groups that are here today, like MAFCA, Maine Farmland Trust, Fork Food Lab, Cumberland County Food Security Coalition, Cultivating Community, and many of our other partners, WolfSnack, many of our other partners who help provide direct technical assistance and support to these farmers to help make sure that everybody can have the best business for their operation and ensure that they have everything that they need to succeed. The total impact of investments that the USDA makes in Maine is in 2024 was over $12 million just for one conservation program that is currently on hold. That money has ripple effect across all of our rural communities, across every community that we're a part of. The money that goes to these farms then goes immediately back out into our community to pay workers on those farms, to pay our contractors that are putting in plumbing, that are drilling wells, that are doing electrical. Everything is interconnected in our rural communities, and the impact of bringing those tax dollars home, our tax dollars, to invest in the things that we care about in farms that are going to feed us, create the fiber, create the flowers, create all of the things that we want to see here in our local communities that creates a vibrant, rural, and healthy economy. These tax dollars, they're approved by Congress. And they're distributed not only directly through the USDA, but they also come through our state Department of Agriculture, and they also flow through those nonprofit service providers like MAFCA and the others that I've mentioned. Just one short example of something that MAFCA is working on right now is that we have over $90,000 in funds that would be going out to farmers directly, but those are on hold. And these are for things like making small improvements in food safety, in wash packs, in efficiencies on farm that make a huge difference in what farmers are able to do and how efficiently and effectively they're able to do that. Farmers face incredible uncertainty every single season, but one thing that has always been stable is USDA contracts. The farmers here today work hard every day in and day out, to grow healthy food that feeds our communities. We need them, And I hope that everyone will join us in standing with these farmers and calling on our congressional delegation to ensure that USDA honors these contracts and pays our farmers. I want to thank, we do have folks here today from Senator Collins' office and Representative Pingree's office. I want to thank you for your continued and effective leadership of really standing up for our farmers. And we know you're going to take this message back to the USDA and back to DC. So we have farmer speakers here today. They're gonna come up one by one and share their story. I'll announce the full list of speakers, but then we're gonna have people reintroduce themselves as well and tell you about their farm and what they're experiencing. Our speakers today are Kevin Levitt from Farmer Kev's Farm, Seth Kreck from Crystal Spring Farm, Alyssa Adkins from Farthest Field Farm, Caitlin Frame from the Milk House, Carl Johansson from Goranson Farm, Janelle Plummer from New Spoke Farm, Kristen Powell from Suncatcher Flower Farm, Michael Levine from Avalon Acres, and Meg Mitchell will be reading a statement on behalf of Rachel Chapman from Seven Moon Farm, who couldn't be here today, but has an important story to share. And we'll wrap up with Rhiannon Hampson from Grace Pond Farm. We'll have time for questions from the media at the end. We're going to try to get through all of the farmer speeches before we ask any questions, but we do encourage folks to stick around and ask questions, and there will be opportunities at the end too if anybody wants to get any additional individual conversations with some of our farmers. So thank you for being here today, and I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
All right, thank you, Sarah, and thanks everybody. My name is Kevin Levitt, and I'm the owner of a small organic farm in Central Maine. For the last 15 years, I have been providing healthy food to the local community through farm shares and nearby co-ops. We have often participated in USDA programs to help keep our farm running. These programs help by lowering the cost of infrastructure projects that allow us to be financially sustainable and produce low-cost food. Our most recent solar array project with the USDA has been a serious financial undertaking. We installed a solar array that would offset the total electricity usage of the farm. We were awarded a grant through the Rural Energy of America program. The program's stated goals are to create renewable energy infrastructure to benefit farms and rural America. When we started the project, we had complete faith in the government to fulfill their end of the contract that they furnished and we agreed to. Today, we have no faith that we will ever be paid by the US government for a project that we have completed, but now have no funds to reimburse us. Our reimbursement is for $48,000, which is no small amount. For the last month, we have had to make financial sacrifices. We have had to not pay others, not pay the contractor who installed the array, who in turn can't pay their bills. We have been distraught on how to come up with funds that we can no longer account for. Contract enforcement is the backbone of our legal system. Without the enforcement of contracts, we have no rule of law. We need the government to honor the contracts they created, they passed through Congress, and they wrote into law. I ask our representatives from Maine, and specifically Susan Collins, to have Maine's best interests and pay those that are rightfully owed. I also urge those in government to stop holding farmers financially hostage. The latest move will only increase the cost of food for Americans. With the new financial strain on farms, less will be in business, leading to less food being produced and eventually higher prices. Again, I ask the government to honor their end of the deal and unfreeze these funds. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Seth Kreck. I run Crystal Spring Farm in Brunswick. Been in business for 21 years. We get certified organic carrots, Brussels sprouts, and wild blueberries. Last year, we signed contracts with the National Resource Conservation Service to make long-lasting, high-impact improvements that will protect our soils from drought and extreme weather, reduce damage to our crops from pests, and provide perennial habitat for a broad range of species. Over the next 4 years, these contracts represent almost $90,000 in reimbursements for work that we will do with our own equipment and the help of our own farm labor. The largest contract with the EQIP program was for $49,995 and would help reimburse some of the expense over 4 years for spreading almost 20,000 cubic yards of wood chips to a depth of about 2 inches on 70 acres of our wild blueberries. Our blueberry lot soils are exceptionally sandy, making them prone to erosion and drought. In dry years, we have minimal harvests, and the stress impacts on the plants and their productivity over several years have an impact over several years. Place here. The scale and expense of moving this much material means buying and modifying equipment, securing a local supply of chips, and arranging for hundreds of hours of labor. This project is foundational to the success of our wild blueberry crop over the course of the next 10 years. Growing this crop, unique to Maine and a part of the character of the state, is difficult and the margins are small. Without this NRCS program, we would not be able to make these improvements, and over time, the quality and volume of our harvest will decline. NRCS programs strengthen farms by allowing them to make foundational improvements that strengthen their ability to grow food, offer jobs, purchase supplies, and continue to be the linchpin of Maine communities. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Alyssa Adkins. I'm a co-owner of Farthest Field Farm, a small-scale no-till farm in Freeport. I first want to thank all of those whose organizing efforts made this gathering come together, to the farmers sharing their stories here and elsewhere, and to those who have come here to listen and to witness. My partner and I are beginning farmers in our 3rd season on our permanent farming space. We had just made the decision for my partner to leave a full-time job in order to be on the farm full-time. Starting a farm is very expensive, and we, like many new farmers, took on that risk because we knew, or thought that we did, that grant funding would help cover some gaps as we scale up. This has been obvious to new farmers for almost 100 years. NRCS funding has been consistently available since the Dust Bowl, and the USDA has honored its word until recent weeks. We have 3 active contracts with NRCS. For 2 of these, we have already fronted tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours of our labor in anticipation of reimbursement. The specific funding for these projects is not yet frozen, but the message from mass firings at NRCS is clear. USDA leadership does not have farmers' interests at heart, and I can no longer trust in the certainty that these and future contracts will be honored. We also participated in the Climate Smart Commodities Grant in 2024, which gave us much needed help with the upfront costs of no-till farming. Because this grant tackles the very real threat of climate change to agriculture, our ability to benefit from it in 2025 is unclear, as it might be entirely canceled. We have already seen the effects of climate change in recent growing seasons: increased flooding, disease pressure, and poorer crop yields. And efforts from the Climate Smart Grant have helped ensure that our farm is resilient to these pressures. We had also intended to apply for a REAP grant, the Rural Energy for America program, to offset the high energy costs of running a farm. But with that program now also on the chopping block, it is much harder for us to shoulder the costs as we scale up production. All of the disruption at USDA has real impacts on our farm. If, due to staffing shortages, our NRCS payments are delayed indefinitely, we will be struck with an unexpected nearly $30,000 loss. And it means that we might not go ahead with the purchase of our 4th high tunnel this year, another nearly $30,000 contract, if we don't have confidence that we will be reimbursed for its construction. This pretty severely hampers our efficiency and ability to scale up our production as planned, which can be crippling for new farms like ours. Maine's food security depends on small farms, and without historically available support in getting off the ground, the number of farms here and across the country will inevitably shrink over time. This means a less secure food system and less fresh, healthy food going to the Mainers from the farms that USDA is desperate to pretend it supports. This funding is essential for farmers and our surrounding communities who benefit from our hard work to grow local food. I ask Maine's delegation to stand up for farmers and for Mainers and do whatever they can to stop the impoundment and cuts to USDA grants and the mass firing of USDA staff. Thank you.
Morning. Thanks everyone for being here. My name is Caitlin Frame. My partner Andy Smith and I own and operate the Milk House in Monmouth, which is a diversified dairy farm and creamery. We and 7 employees manage 250 acres of farmland, tending hogs and cattle, produce milk, yogurt, beef, and pork for our community. For the last 12 years, Milk House milk, yogurt, and meat reaches thousands of Mainers every week via grocery stores, farm stands, schools, colleges, and universities. Like the other farmers here today and across the country, we've been impacted by the Trump administration's illegal impoundment of congressionally allocated funds. We were awarded a REAP grant of $20,000 to help cover the installation of a 27-kilowatt solar array on one of our barns. This project helps to offset the high cost of electricity for our energy-intensive business, making it more financially stable. Our project has been completed, yet despite a signed federal contract and obligated grant funds, we've been notified by USDA staff that funds are frozen and no one knows if or when payments will be made. All USDA grant programs, as you've heard, operate on a reimbursement basis. The federal government refusing to honor financial obligations to ordinary Americans is unprecedented. Thousands of American farmers have budgeted for 2025 and the coming years based on signed USDA contracts. Farmers have paid upfront for projects they expected to be reimbursed for and are now left holding the bag. Unless this is quickly remedied, it will no doubt put some farms out of business entirely, which will change the character of rural communities across the country. We also participate in the Conservation Stewardship Program, the Climate Smart Program, and the EQIP program. These are multi-year contracted programs that support farmers' management of their soil and water resources, providing funds for infrastructure or specific practices to meet goals of, for example, manure runoff. We are concerned these funds will not be released as well. And again, this presents a major obstacle for cash flow on farms as these funds have been obligated and then very much counted on in a farm's annual or multi-year budget. We, along with thousands of other farmers, have applied for the EQIP program, but have been told not to expect funding due to budget cuts. Without federal cost share programs, it is not possible for most farmers at any scale, conventional or organic, to make necessary improvements that keep our state's water clean. The funds for these projects do not stay on our farms. They immediately go to contractors across the state for concrete, building materials, and carpentry work, which is a boon for local economies. The loss of tens of millions of dollars to farms will have major ripple effects across our state's economy in the coming years. Dairy farmers are also being impacted by staff cuts at the FSA. Farmers' ability to access or refinance loans is under threat, leaving some businesses unable to borrow the money necessary to keep their operations afloat. We are hearing from fellow dairy farmers and processors that federal funds for the Dairy Business Innovation Center grants are also frozen. Once again, we're talking about small businesses who have expended funds being left holding the bag despite having signed USDA contracts. Maine's dairy farmers and processors are not members of the financially insulated millionaire and billionaire class. Even if these funds are eventually released, these delays alone will be financially catastrophic to many businesses. There has been significant growth in the sourcing of local food by public schools across the state in recent years through federal and state grant money. This has been an exciting opportunity for our farm and many others. We currently supply 8 school districts with our yogurt, helping to feed hundreds of Maine kids every day. We have plans to expand sales to school districts. However, if this administration follows through with gutting the Department of Ag and Education, it is likely that funding shortfalls will end these buy local programs. Trump ran on an America First and a Make America Healthy Again agenda, yet his administration has thus far done nothing to further these campaign promises. Instead, he's sowing chaos and confusion by not honoring federal contracts made with small business owners, harming the farmers in this room and across the country, we who have devoted our lives to nourishing our communities. Farming is a financially risky business with extremely tight margins. Slashing federal funding to our farms will make things even more financially challenging. Taken together, these cuts will have a devastating impact on our rural communities across Maine. Unless this administration reverses course and reinstates funding and staffing for federal ag programs, we expect to see Maine farms and dairies being forced out of the industry at a greatly accelerated rate in the coming years.
Hello, just gonna pull up my little letter here. My name is Carl Johansson. My family and I run Goranson Farm. It's a 79-acre diversified organic vegetable farm, and we're located in Dresden. We supply our community year-round with hundreds of thousands of pounds of produce, and we've relied on NRCS and rural development since my grandfather and grandmother began the farm in the 60s. Over the years, we've completed a diversity of projects, including composting pads, irrigation systems, irrigation wells, high tunnel installations, and cover cropping practices. These projects have generated work for local carpenters, electricians, excuse me, excavation and concrete contractors, and well drillers. So these funds have gone directly back into our rural economy. They've supported Maine grain farmers through the purchase of Maine-grown cover crop seed. Without NRCS, our farm would be a shell of the business it is today. They have spurred our farm's economic development and supported our ability to grow more food for more Mainers and in a more environmentally sustainable way, so that we can keep growing food for the long haul. We currently have a contract with NRCS through the Conservation Stewardship Program. This program was funded through the Inflation Reduction Act, and that funding is now subject to the freeze. For us, this totals over $45,000 over the next 3 years. And in this past fall, the fall of 2024, we invested over $16,000 in pumps and supplies to fulfill the contract for this year. These purchases were made under the assumption that the funds would be reimbursed at the end of this calendar year. And this freeze and additional threats of tariffs by the Trump administration have thrust our business into a climate of economic uncertainty. Can we depend on our government honoring our contract when our neighbors aren't getting reimbursed? Do I call up my electrician? And we've been planning the install of this pump for the past 4 months. Dan, I'm sorry, but we don't have the money to pay you to complete the wiring of the pump you were planning on installing this spring. Do I sell the pump at a loss to try to recoup some of the funds that we've spent in December? Will the funds we were promised in 2020 and 2027 get clawed back? Can we rely on the long-term commitment of this contract? And will this incur other costs? Will we have to make other business decisions that will reduce the growth of our business? The cuts to, this is a separate issue, but in terms of staffing, the cuts to staffing, I think will have a dramatic impact on our ability to get approval for projects if the funding is released. It took over a year to have the NRCS engineer approve the pump design. It's not an overstaffed agency. Withholding of funds is eroding my family's trust in our government's leaders. There is no transparency, no time frame. And it's hard not to wonder, what is this for? Why hold funds for programs that have historically held such universal support? Are we sacrificing our rural agricultural economies and the income of small contractors that support them to give billionaires and huge corporations a hearty tax? Do I need to worry about retribution from my government for standing up and voicing the impact this funding freeze has on our family farm? As one of the largest employers in Dresden, the impacts to our business will have ripple effects throughout our community. Senator Collins, Representative Golden, Senator King, please work with Shelley Pingree to stand up for Maine's farmers. We are banking on it.
Hello, my name is Janelle Plummer. Thank you for the opportunity to share a bit about our farm this morning. I own and operate New Spoke Farm in West Paris with my partner. We grow 2 acres of certified organic vegetables for over 100 families through our CSA. We are one of a handful of certified organic farms growing for direct-to-community sales in Oxford County. 2025 will be our 4th year in business. I'm here today to share how the federal funding freeze is affecting my farm. We were enrolled with CASA for the Climate Smart Farming and Marketing Program, which is funded through the Partnerships for Climate Smart Commodities. My farm was eligible to receive up to $43,000 now through 2028 with these annual contracts. At this point, that funding is not available and may not be coming back. This grant was going to be transformational for my business. It was going to allow us to build permanent infrastructure like a deer fence to protect our crops and hard-earned revenue. It is going to allow us to plant perennial hedgerows to increase pollinator and native species habitat and diversify our future crop offerings. It was going to allow us to purchase equipment to increase operational efficiencies, saving our backs and letting us build an efficient, sustainable business for the long haul. It was going to pay us to invest in improving soil health through cover cropping, reduced tillage, and other important farming practices. Perhaps most importantly, it was going to bridge financial gaps that currently exist as we work to scale our beginning business. At this time, those investments and projects are off the table. Without this funding, we are seriously limited in our ability to plan effectively for the future of our farm and business. The loss of this funding means we can't hire our first employees this year. The loss of this funding means we may struggle to make ends meet because this grant isn't available to cover part of the cost of seed and materials and equipment as it was intended to. I know some people are of the opinion that specialty growers like me shouldn't rely on federal dollars, but some of the programs you've heard about today have been around since the Dust Bowl. These funding pools have historically been overall consistent and reliable resources for farms of all sizes, crops, and business scopes to engage with. This is about feeding our community while working with razor-thin margins. My farm may be new, but these programs are not. Terminating the roles of service providers, not honoring existing contracts, and deleting transformational programs like Climate Smart Commodities hurts everyone, farmers and eaters alike. I run a business in rural Oxford County, in the state with the oldest population in the country. There are farmers just like me in your community. You've heard from a lot of us today. Taking these funding opportunities away from farmers, breaking existing contracts with farmers, it affects all of us. In the same way that food starts in a farmer's field and ends on your plate, the repercussions of these political decisions will ripple out into all of our communities. The effect of this doesn't end on my farm, it only begins there. I am here today to urge our representatives to stand up for the farmers and eaters in our community and protect these programs, unfreeze these funds, honor the existing contracts in place. I'm here to urge you to work with me. Please contact your reps and demand they continue to support the vibrant working landscape and the people and businesses that make it so. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Kristen Powell and I'm a business owner and farmer of Suncatcher Flower Farm, a 2-acre certified organic no-till cut flower farm in Brunswick, Maine. I lease land from a fellow farmer. And I'm also a sublessor of the Brunswick Towson Land Trust. I'm someone who's passionate about land stewardship, no-till farming methods, adapting to climate change, and working in tandem with nature. I applied for a Climate Smart grant and received my first contract in the summer of 2024. This initial contract helped offset costs for annual implementations of no-till and reduced tillage practices that support the current and future health of the land I steward. Remaining funds available for further contracts of up to $47,000 were frozen, barring me from the opportunity to further secure not only the funds necessary for continuing these crucial practices that contribute to the longevity of the farmland itself, but also a planned contract to build a deer fence, which is a significant asset to protect the future of the farmland and the flower business. Small businesses and farms such as mine rely on these grants to make improvements, to cover unnecessary labor costs, to help establish long-term solutions over short-term fixes, and to help establish lasting infrastructure that otherwise would be unaffordable. As a result of the frozen funds, we will need to lean more heavily into laborious processes that cost more money, require more labor, and will need to be repeated annually. The work we do through these contracts directly impacts every aspect of our system, from working in cooperation with other farmers to improving land conservation and preservation efforts with the land trust. When we lose these funds, the repercussions trickle down and out to everyone in the community, as you've heard from the rest of the farmers here. Thanks.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Michael Levine. I'm the co-owner of Avalon Acres in Hollis. We're one of the smaller operations up here because we work about a little less than half an acre, and we are a certified organic produce farmer. And I'm here really to talk more about the psychological impact. My fellow farmers have done a fantastic job of explaining the programs, the amounts of money involved, the business practices, etc. We too were supposed to get a climate resiliency grant from PASA, which we're probably not going to get. But as a beginning farmer, this is only our third season, and I've been working really, really hard to try to get our business up and running. It's really very difficult to make a business model work as a farmer if you're not getting some subsidies for some of these practices that, you know, it doesn't make economic sense to do some of these conservation practices because, you know, you're spending money and you're not necessarily getting direct product out of it, but you're investing in the land and the health of the soil for generations to come. And it just takes away the incentive to do it. And honestly, it takes away the motivation to be a farmer when you are thinking that your government's not going to help you out at all. And you're on your own. It's really difficult. It's a very hard business. I don't come from a family tradition of farming. I'm learning as I go. And MOFCA has helped me so much through the transition to organic partnership program, which helped us become certified. And they walked us through all of the steps to try to get this climate smart grant that was going to make a big difference in the coming season. I mean, I'm still out there with a hoe, working things by hand, and I was going to be able to invest in some tools that would help us work a little more efficiently out there. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And honestly, some days you wake up in the morning and you're like, why am I even doing this? You know, what's the point? And I'm concerned about the long-term industry that farmers are just going to toss in the towel, because if the government's not going to help you, it really makes you feel very isolated and alone. So I really hope that the folks that are working hard in Washington to unfreeze these funds will also remember that it's the whole industry that's at risk here. And then what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to eat without people growing food for us to eat? So thank you for your time and your hard work.
Hi there. My name's Meg Mitchell. I'm a MOFCA employee providing technical assistance to farmers around the state. Many of these farmers are participating in the Climate Smart Commodities program that I've been managing. And I think you've heard about the impact very clearly. I think I'll just read a statement from Rachel Chapman, one of the participants in that program. Seven Moon Farm is a small-scale, MOFCA certified, diversified vegetable, flower, and herb farm in Waldo County, Maine. Seven Moon Farm is woman-owned and woman-operated. Aside from following certified organic standards, we focus on reducing our tillage and increasing biodiversity using crop rotations and cover cropping schedules to support our soil health and improve climate resiliency. We feel passionately in our responsibility to help steward the land for ourselves and the generations to come, and to do our best to provide food for those who want and need it. We sell the majority of our produce within 20 miles of our farm, and we work hard to provide everyone in our community with food. We accept SNAP, EBT, and WIC at farmers markets and in our CSA, and donate as much of our extra produce to cleaning groups throughout the season. The sudden and thoughtless cuts of these federal funds has drastic impact on our business. The USDA terminated its contract with the third-party reviewer who approves environmental reviews necessary for our Climate Smart grant, which would have given us $6,000 in funding towards planting a windbreak to protect our greenhouses and infrastructure from the destructive wind damage that our property is vulnerable to. The executive order that came out pausing all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance froze our Maine Produce Safety Improvement Grant, which would have provided up to $10,000 to update and improve our produce processing and sanitation infrastructure in our wash and pack station. Beyond just these grants, the biggest and most upsetting uncertainty relates to our ability to continue our farm as a whole. We're currently in the process of negotiating a farm ownership loan with the Farm Service Agency to purchase the property that we hope to be operating on this year, after 4 years operating on leased land. The executive order freezing federal funding temporarily froze this funding as well. And while that specific part was rescinded, the capricious and uncertain nature of the current situation has us feeling incredibly worried about our future. While we appreciate the help and support of our FSA agents during this time, we nevertheless are left feeling scared for our future. There is no doubt that without access to this loan, not to mention the additional farm equipment and farm operating loans we are also still waiting from the FSA, we will not be able to continue as a business and our lives will be irreparably changed.
I wanted to see everybody. So hi, Rhiannon Hampson. I am a co-owner of Grace Pond Farm. It's an organic dairy and pastured livestock farm in Knox County. And I am an occasional bureaucrat because oftentimes farming does not pay all the bills. It especially does not pay to be a dairy farmer. So today I join with my fellow farmers in Mafka to be more of that occasional bureaucrat person here. Most recently, that took the form of being the state director for USDA rural development for the Biden-Harris administration. So for about 3.5 years, I went around the state speaking broadly, loudly, and proudly about the Renewable Energy for America grant, our value-added producer grant, and all of the other federal funding opportunities that we have. As a farmer, we're also enrolled in an NRCS EQIP program. Our funding is not caught in any of that. We're very grateful that ours is coming through the Farm Bill program. So we are not feeling the effects of that. Our USDA staff in the state of Maine becomes enmeshed and embedded in our lives. I frequently joke with our district conservationist that Peter and Lori and Tim see my husband in a week more often than I do when they are at our farm. And that is often very true. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about public funding and the reason that we use our public dollars in this way to support our farms. And when Abraham Lincoln created the USDA in 1862, he very quickly called it the People's Department. That is the people, all of the people's department. And the reason that we are so proud of that kind of designation is because it is this collective effort to recognize the value of things that we know, are critically important to our small and rural communities, especially, right? When you are in a place with fewer than 10,000 people in the state of Maine, and you turn the faucet on and water comes out, clean water from a municipal source, that is likely USDA. If you call 911 and an ambulance shows up, that is also likely USDA. If you send your kids to school, oftentimes there is some USDA funding in that. And what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that we invest in public infrastructure and public services with our shared tax dollars because we recognize the value and the need in doing so. And our farms are no different. They are small rural businesses. They pay taxes, sometimes an extraordinary amount of taxes. We live in a community that does not forgive the personal business tax. So we pay that, we pay our property tax, we pay tax on goods and services, we put diesel in our, delivery van. We are paying a lot of money into our shared economy. And when we access these programs through USDA, we're getting some of our own tax money back to reinvest in our businesses to then support others, right? Because if you ask any one of these farmers where they spend $1 when somebody gives them $1, they're going to tell you it is not going surfing in Costa Rica, my friends. It is not like taking that much hoped for vacation or even putting it into a retirement account most of the time, right? They reinvest it immediately in their business. They buy more seed. They buy a tractor implement. They hire a human being and pay them a living wage or as close as they can come, plus a lot of pork chops and maybe all the milk they can drink. So we reinvest these dollars that then go back to work for our communities again. Small rural businesses, and farms are small rural businesses, are worthy of having their own tax dollars come home to work for them. Because it really does, that rising tide really lifts all boats. And finally, I think I'll just say, we have been, my farm has been caught in the federal kerfuffle at times, and we recognize the value of the goods and services that we provide, right? We were stuck in that shutdown, that 2018 to 2019 historic shutdown. Anyone remember? And the amount of money, because farms are operating and other small rural businesses are operating on such a shoestring. The amount of money that it takes to dig yourself out of a hole as a small business is not always commensurate with the amount of money that you're missing out on, right? That $10,000 of withheld funding can multiply pretty exponentially and pretty quickly. So these funds were invested for a reason. We believe in the value. And, I believe in our public infrastructure, and I believe in the People's Department. We know how to do the right thing. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our incredible farmers today for sharing their really impactful stories. We do have time for a few questions. If anybody from the media would like to ask any questions today, you can direct them towards us.
I'd love to chat with you folks, maybe one-on-one.
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
Great, we can do some one-on-one interviews. Did you have a question you want to ask the group?
Sure, I was just gonna ask, farming has been a really important historical and cultural part of the state that someone could maybe speak on. Maybe outside of the economic impacts, but the cultural impacts that Maine would see from this freeze.
Great, the question was about the cultural and economic impacts of this freeze. Step forward. That.
I think it's an important question. As you drive around the state, especially outside of places like Portland, farms are really linchpins of their communities. They're places that people work, maybe when they're younger. They get their first experience being a part of a working landscape. These farms, in addition to employing people, they buy supplies. They are connected with their communities by providing food for them. And so, especially in a state like Maine, that's so much of our acreage is rural and is in agriculture. Farms really provide a baseline of our culture and who we are. I know when I'm talking about Maine to people in other parts of the country, they've heard about lobster, but the impact of potatoes, blueberries. We have one of those most vibrant farmers market communities in the whole country. It's a very lucky and unique place to call home. And there's a reason that it's, you drive in the state, it says the way life should be. We're still really connected to our rural environment. I grew up in the Midwest. The infrastructure of small and community-based agriculture no longer exists. People are completely disconnected to how they feed themselves, where that food comes from. And in Maine, that's really not true. And so the programs that we're talking about today go a long ways to supporting the farms, making that community connection survive and continuing to that character going forward.
I just want to add one thing to what he said, which is that there's a lot of pressure on farmers to sell their land for development purposes, especially where I live in Hollis. There's a lot of subdivisions going up. And at some point, as I spoke to the psychological nature of farming, it might be more tempting to cash out and sell your land for development than to continue farming it. And that would obviously impact the cultural nature of our communities as well.
Great, and I'll just add, Maine looks the way it does because of our agricultural landscape. Dairy has been the backbone of our state and our rural communities for many, many, many years. We know that the preservation of our agricultural lands is critical. There's a finite amount of good soil for growing good food. And Maine is a really lucky and fortunate place to have some of the best opportunities to grow incredible food. And farming is not like manufacturing, right? This isn't about making widgets where you can turn the production up or you can turn the production down based on what things are shaping up in the market or what your cash flow is looking like. you are planning sometimes years in advance for your production, for your crop rotation, and you're beholden to the uncertainty of the seasons and the market and inflation and labor and all of the things that farmers have to deal with. It's an incredible act of resilience that our farmers get up every day and plan ahead and think about what's going to happen months from now and years from now. And the culture of Maine is really embedded in our farms and our rural communities. So standing up and supporting our farmers is critical to supporting Maine and the food that we need. Great. Any other questions? Penny?
Given the focus on grocery prices, I know some people mentioned some of the impacts on consumers and schools. But could people maybe directly address that? I know a lot of people who are reading the stories or watching stories will, that'll be the impacts.
Yeah. Anybody directly talking about pricing?
As far as pricing would go, you're not gonna see an immediate impact. It's not gonna be like the egg prices that we're seeing overnight, but it's gonna take time. There's gonna be a lag effect in where people are discouraged to grow more. And so because Maine is, our season is from year to year, you're probably gonna see prices going higher, you know, towards the end of the year and into the following 2026 year. So, and it's something that will creep up, and if we don't have faith in what we're gonna have for income, then obviously we're gonna have to increase prices.
Anybody else want to speak to that? Okay.
So a lot of these funds, like the Climate Smart program in particular, was $3.5 million dedicated to farmers implementing conservation funds. And if those practices have to be implemented at a private cost, you're going to see that in budgets and plans and sales and marketing as well.
I also want to point out that the timing of this funding freeze is well after we've already created our business plans for the current growing season. So to echo what was already said, it's unlikely you'll see an immediate impact because, you know, we'll scramble and cover costs because we're already well along in our plans. But for next year, for 2026, you know, if we can't count on this money, we're not going to obviously budget for it again. We're just going to have to raise prices because that's really the only other source of revenue we have.
Any other questions? Any?
Has there been anyone or any organizations that have been able to help bridge the gap that maybe people might want to know about, either other farmers or consumers or readers that might want to know who's helping survive?
Actually, would like to say one more thing about pricing real quick. So, you know, we just heard from a bunch of farmers, you know, pretty much everybody up here is a direct market farmer. But in the dairy industry and many other farming sectors, farmers have no control over the prices that we receive. So if we lose these subsidy programs, we're just going to go out of business. And that's what we will see. And that's, you know, that pace of dairy is going out of business in the state of Maine is going to increase exponentially if we don't get the support that we need.
In terms of bridging the gap for these farms, we're monitoring the situation day by day. We are certainly preparing if it comes to it and farmers need gap support, gap loans, cash flow needs. That is something that in crisis after crisis that we've experienced over the last 5 years, we know that our community wants to come together to support our local farmers. These are the folks that we see at the farmers market every week. These are the folks that are in the co-op and our local grocery stores. We want to make sure this produce is available, that this meat and milk and these other products are available to us. And so if at this moment, we don't have an emergency relief fund yet, but we are monitoring this daily to understand what are the needs of these farms and how can we all come together to collectively ensure that they can continue forward. The easiest thing would be for USDA just to actually pay the contracts that they've already committed to, because as I mentioned, the scale of this is millions of dollars in the state of Maine. This is not just, you know, one little thing here, one little thing there. This is widespread. And the government has the money to do this. The contracts have already been signed. The money has already been appropriated and allocated by Congress. Most of this is mandatory funding that has come through, and there's no reason that these contracts shouldn't be paid. Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you to all of our farmers for coming out and sharing their stories. We'll give them a big round of applause. We will stay around for a few minutes if anybody wants to have any individual conversations, and we really appreciate you continuing to cover this story. And we hope that our members of Congress will continue to support us and bring this message back to DC. Thank you all.